The last thing my doctor told me before the anesthesia settled in was, "Mrs. Evelyn Carter, try to relax. We'll take good care of you." I wanted to believe him. At 65, I'd survived more than most people ever would. I had buried my husband, worked 2 jobs for nearly 20 years, raised my son alone, and spent every spare dollar making sure he never felt the weight of our struggles. If anyone had earned a peaceful life, I thought it was me. I was wrong. Because the greatest pain I would ever experience wasn't lying in a hospital bed after surgery. It was hearing my own son calmly plan to steal everything I'd spent my lifetime building, and he thought I couldn't hear a single word. The room was strangely quiet. I couldn't open my eyes. My arms felt heavy, and my body refused to respond, but my hearing was crystal clear. Machines beeped steadily beside me. Somewhere down the hallway, a nurse laughed. Footsteps approached. The door clicked shut. Then I heard my son's voice. "She's still out." I wanted to answer him. I wanted to tell him I was awake, but my lips wouldn't move. Another man's voice followed. "You sure? Look at her," my son replied with a small laugh. "She's completely unconscious." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Why wasn't he relieved that the surgery was over? Why did he sound excited? The second man lowered his voice. "So, today." "Today," my son answered without hesitation. "We've waited long enough." Silence. Then I heard paper sliding across the bedside table. A thick stack. Legal documents. My heartbeat began to pound inside my ears. "What if she wakes up?" "She won't." My son's confidence made me sick. "The doctor said she'd be groggy for hours." Another pause. "After this, the house is ours." "Ours? What house?" Then I realized exactly which one he meant. The little white house I'd bought with my husband's life insurance. The house I'd spent 33 years paying off. The house where my son had taken his first steps. The house I had refused to sell after my husband's death because it held every memory of the family we'd built. I felt tears collecting beneath my closed eyelids. Not because of the house, because of him. How had the little boy who once cried whenever I left for work become a man who could stand beside my hospital bed and discuss taking everything I owned? I searched my memory for the moment I had failed him. Had I spoiled him, protected him too much, forgiven too easily, or had greed simply found a home inside his heart? The second man sounded nervous. "You sure your mother hasn't changed her will?" "No. You checked?" "I checked 6 months ago. 6 months ago he had been looking through my legal papers. How long had he been planning this?" Every answer only created another question. Then I heard a familiar woman's voice. Soft, confident, "My daughter-in-law. I told you this hospital stay was the perfect opportunity." My stomach tightened. She had been part of this all along. "I've already talked to the realtor," she continued. "We can renovate the place and sell it before Christmas." Sell it? They weren't just trying to take my home. They wanted to erase it. Every photograph, every memory, every piece of my husband's life, reduced to another property listing. My son's voice became colder than I'd ever heard. "Mom doesn't need that old house anymore. She'll probably end up in assisted living anyway." The words struck harder than the surgery ever could. Assisted living without even asking me, without giving me a choice? I realized something terrifying. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a plan. A carefully rehearsed one. Every conversation, every visit, every unexpected act of kindness over the past few months, had it all been leading to this? Paper rustled again. "I'll guide her hand," my daughter-in-law whispered. "No one will question it." Guide, my hand. A wave of panic surged through me. I fought with every ounce of strength to move a finger. Nothing. My body still felt trapped beneath layers of invisible concrete. Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I looked like a sleeping woman. Someone gently lifted my right hand. Not with love, not with concern, with purpose. I recognized my son's touch immediately. I'd held that same hand when he was born. Now he was holding mine for an entirely different reason. His fingers felt strangely unfamiliar, like they belonged to a stranger. "Easy," he whispered. "Don't smudge anything." The second man asked quietly, "Are we really doing this?" My son answered without a trace of guilt. "By the time she realizes what's happened, it'll be too late." Those 7 words changed everything. Not because I believed him, but because, in that exact moment, I made myself a promise. If God gave me one more chance to stand on my own feet, I wouldn't spend it begging for my son's love. I'd spend it making sure the truth came to light, even if it cost him everything he thought he was about to gain. Just then, the hospital room door swung open. Someone walked in. and the first words out of that person's mouth made every heartbeat in the room stop. The room froze. No one spoke. No one even breathed. My son's grip on my hand loosened so quickly that it slipped back onto the hospital blanket. Then I heard a familiar voice. Would someone care to explain why there are legal documents spread across my patient's bed? It was Dr. Michael Reeves, the surgeon who had operated on me only hours earlier. For the first time since waking beneath the fog of anesthesia, I felt hope. My daughter-in-law recovered first. "Oh, doctor," she said with a nervous laugh, "it's nothing serious. Evelyn asked us to bring some paperwork. We were just organizing a few things while she rests." Dr. Reeves didn't answer immediately. I imagined him looking from one face to another. Then he asked calmly, "Interesting. Because my patient hasn't been medically cleared to make any legal decisions." Silence. "I also instructed the nursing staff that she was not to be disturbed." No one answered. My son finally cleared his throat. "We're just trying to help Mom. She's been talking about simplifying her estate." Dr. Reeves spoke again, this time with the calm confidence of someone who had seen too many families reveal their true colors inside hospital rooms. "Then that conversation can wait." He gathered the papers from the bedside table. "I'll leave these at the nurse's station." Panic crept into my son's voice. "Actually, that's not necessary." "Oh, we still need them." "I'm afraid you don't." I heard footsteps. The door opened, then closed. The room became painfully quiet again. My son let out a long breath. "Damn it!" My daughter-in-law whispered sharply, "I told you we came too early." We should have waited another day. So this wasn't their only opportunity. They intended to come back. They left a few moments later. When the door finally closed behind them, I forced every muscle in my body to respond. My fingers twitched, just a little, then another finger. Slowly, my eyelids opened. The hospital lights burned my vision. Everything was blurry. A nurse standing beside the bed immediately smiled. "Mrs. Carter?" I managed the weakest nod. "You gave us quite a scare." Within minutes, Dr. Reeves returned. His expression softened when he saw I was awake. "Welcome back." I tried to speak. Only a whisper escaped. "My son." "I know," he replied quietly. "We'll talk." Something in his voice told me he already suspected more than he was saying. Later that evening, after the nurses helped me sit up, Dr. Reeves closed the door and pulled a chair beside my bed. "I need to ask you something." I nodded. "Did you authorize your family to bring legal documents here today?" "No." The word scraped against my dry throat. His face tightened. "I thought so." He placed the folder on the bedside table. "They claimed you requested it." I looked down at the papers, property transfer documents, power of attorney forms, several pages already marked with yellow tabs, ready for signatures, ready for fingerprints, ready to change my entire life. My hands trembled, not from weakness, from heartbreak. I heard them. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. "You heard everything?" I nodded again. "My son said it would be too late." The doctor remained silent for several seconds. Then he quietly reached into his coat pocket. "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." He placed a small device on the table, a digital voice recorder. "I wear this during difficult consultations so I don't miss important medical details." He looked directly into my eyes. "When I entered your room earlier, it was still recording. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe." "You mean, I captured part of the conversation, not everything, but enough to hear my son discussing the house, enough to hear my daughter-in-law mention selling it, enough to raise serious questions." Tears rolled down my cheeks, not tears of sadness this time, relief. For the first time all day, I wasn't alone. Someone believed me, someone had proof. Dr. Reeves lowered his voice. "I'm not your attorney, I'm not the police, but I strongly suggest you contact someone you trust before your family knows you're awake." Someone I trusted. The words echoed painfully. There weren't many names left. Most of my old friends had moved away. Some had passed. Then one face appeared in my mind. Margaret. My husband's younger sister. The one person my son never liked, because she always saw straight through him. I asked the nurse for my phone. There were 14 missed calls, every single one, from my son. Not one message asking if I was okay, only texts asking, "When are you awake? Call me immediately. We need to finish the paperwork." Not, "How are you feeling, Mom?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Only paperwork. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Margaret. She picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn?" The moment I heard her voice, I broke down. "I need your help. I told her everything, every word I'd heard, every document I'd seen, every lie. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she said something that sent a chill down my spine. "Evelyn, I think this started long before the hospital. What do you mean? I've been afraid to tell you." "Tell me what?" She took a slow breath. "About 3 months ago. Your son came to my house asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know whether your original property deed was still in your safe." My heart stopped. He knew about the safe? Yes, and he asked something else. What? He wanted to know whether you'd ever updated your will. The room suddenly felt colder. This wasn't a desperate decision made during my surgery. This had been planned. For months. Maybe longer. I stared out the hospital window into the dark evening sky. The woman reflected in the glass looked older than she had that morning. Not because of the surgery, because betrayal ages a person faster than time ever can. I quietly wiped away my tears. No more crying. No more excuses. If my son wanted a fight over my future. He was about to discover that the woman who raised him was far stronger than the woman he believed was lying helpless in that hospital bed. And before I left that hospital, I was going to make one phone call that would change his life forever. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My son Daniel was waiting outside with a smile so warm that for a split second I almost forgot what I'd heard. Wrapping me in a careful hug. "Mom," he said, "thank God you're okay. We were so worried." I looked into his eyes, the same eyes I had kissed goodnight when he was a little boy. Now they were searching my face for one thing. Did I remember? I smiled gently. "I'm feeling much better." The relief that crossed his face told me everything. He believed I'd forgotten. Good, because sometimes the truth catches people faster when they think they're safe. On the drive home, Daniel talked nonstop. He told me how stressful the surgery had been, how he barely slept, how he had spent every day praying for me. Every lie sounded smoother than the last. I simply watched the road through the passenger window. Not once did I tell him that I remembered every word spoken beside my hospital bed. When we arrived at my house, something felt different. The lock on my front door had been replaced. I stopped walking. "Daniel, when did this happen?" He hesitated. "Oh, I had the locks changed. For your safety." "My safety?" "Yeah. I figured it would be easier if I kept a spare key." A spare key to the home he had already planned to sell. I nodded without arguing. Inside, however, another promise formed. This would be the last decision he ever made about my home without my permission. The following morning, while Daniel and my daughter-in-law were out, Margaret arrived. She wasn't alone. With her came an estate attorney, a licensed notary, and a retired detective named Thomas Green, an old family friend who now worked as a private investigator. Unlike my son, they didn't come asking for my thumbprint. They came asking one question. "What do you want, Evelyn?" No one had asked me that in months, not even my own son. I looked around the living room my husband and I had built together. "I want the truth, and I want my home protected." The attorney nodded. "Then let's begin." For the next several hours, we reviewed every legal document connected to my property. My will, my deed, my bank accounts, my medical directives, everything. Nothing had been transferred, nothing had been signed, nothing had been stolen. But the attempted deception had revealed something far more dangerous. My son had already gathered copies of confidential documents, learned where important records were stored, and begun preparing paperwork without my knowledge. The attorney looked at me. "Mrs. Carter, I strongly recommend changing everything so the first did every emergency contact, every access authorization, every financial instruction, every legal document. And then I made the hardest decision of my life. I removed Daniel as my medical and financial decision-maker. Not because I wanted revenge, because trust, once broken this completely, could no longer protect me." A week later, Daniel came to visit carrying flowers. He smiled as though nothing had happened. "I brought your favorites. Thank you." We sat in silence. Then he reached into his briefcase. "I was thinking. There are still a few documents we should probably organize." I looked at the folder. The same yellow tabs. The same practiced smile. The same performance. I gently pushed the folder back toward him. "I've already taken care of my estate." His smile disappeared. "What?" "I met with my attorney." Color drained from his face. "You..." "What?" "I updated everything." The room became perfectly still. His voice sharpened. "You made those decisions without talking to me?" I couldn't help noticing the irony. without talking to him, the son who had tried to make decisions for me while he believed I was unconscious. I folded my hands calmly. "You stopped asking what I wanted a long time ago." He stared at me. Then he whispered, "You remember, don't you?" I held his gaze. "I remember every single word." The silence that followed was deafening. His shoulders sank. He knew. There was no explanation that could erase what I'd heard. No excuse that could justify it. No lie strong enough to rebuild what greed had destroyed. "I can explain." "No." "You misunderstood." "I heard you." He lowered his eyes. "I heard you say the house would be yours. I heard your wife talking about selling it, and the first heard you say it would be too late by the time I woke up." Tears filled his eyes. Whether they came from guilt or fear, I no longer cared. Then I reached into the drawer beside my chair, not for anger, not for revenge, for a small digital recorder. I placed it on the table. I wasn't the only one listening. His face turned white. "The doctor." "Yes, he heard enough." "I never wanted to use it to destroy you. I wanted it to remind myself that I wasn't imagining what happened." Daniel buried his face in his hands. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. A month later, he moved out of the rental property I had been quietly helping him afford. Not because I threw him onto the street, because I stopped rescuing him from the consequences of his own choices. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't protecting someone from failure. It's allowing them to face it. I wished him well, but I refused to finance his betrayal. As for my home, I kept it. Not because it was valuable, because it represented every sacrifice my husband and I had made together. I planted new roses in the front yard that spring, the same kind my husband used to bring home every anniversary. Each morning I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise spill across the lawn. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful again, not because everyone inside loved me, because everyone inside respected my boundaries, even if that meant I lived there alone. People often ask whether I ever forgave my son. The answer surprises them. Yes, I forgave him. Forgiveness freed my heart. But forgiveness is not the same as trust. Trust must be earned, and some betrayals leave scars that wisdom refuses to ignore. If my story teaches anything, let it be this: never mistake a quiet mother for a powerless one. The hands that spent a lifetime building a family are still strong enough to protect everything she built. The end.